Alien Queen panicked without a translator, until the human janitor did something incredible. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The vast diplomatic hall of the Galactic Nexus Station hummed with nervous energy as delegates from 17 worlds shifted uncomfortably in their seats. High above them all, surrounded by an entourage of chittering attendants, sat Queen Zalara of the Maraxian Empire, her iridescent scales gleaming under the artificial lights. Ethan Cole pushed his cleaning cart quietly along the perimeter of the room, trying to remain as invisible as possible. Being a janitor aboard the most prestigious diplomatic station in the known galaxy wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave him a front-row seat to history in the making. Not that anyone ever noticed him. To the diplomats and their staff, he was just another service drone, part of the background noise of the station. Today's summit was different, though. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Maraxian Empire, one of the most powerful forces in the quadrant, had requested this emergency meeting. According to station gossip, they were facing some kind of existential threat, something dire enough that the notoriously isolationist Queen Zalara had personally made the journey. Ethan carefully emptied a waste receptacle, keeping his head down while his eyes tracked the movements of the various species gathered. The bipedal Vexorians with their multiple eye stalks, the gelatinous Morith delegation floating in their containment suits, the towering Keldum warriors standing stoically at attention, all of them were present. This was big. Ambassador Chun, humanity's representative, sat near the center of the assembly. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 70 years ago. They were still seen as upstarts by many of the older species, tolerated mainly for their adaptability and the curious diplomatic advantage that came from being physiologically unremarkable. Humans weren't the strongest, smartest, or most technologically advanced species, but they could communicate with almost anyone. A high-pitched whine suddenly cut through the room, drawing everyone's attention to the Maraxian delegation. Queen Zalara was speaking rapidly to her attendants, her slender fingers moving in agitated patterns. The Queen's translator, a complex device worn around her neck, had begun to emit a series of error tones. The human ambassador frowned, leaning toward his aide. "What's happening?" "Translator malfunction," the aide whispered back. The Maraxian language has over 4,000 unique clicking sounds and pheromone markers. Their translation systems are incredibly complex. Ethan watched as a ripple of concern spread through the room. The Maraxian queen was becoming visibly distressed, her scales shifting from iridescent blue to a deep purple, a sign of agitation. Ethan remembered from the cultural briefing all station staff received. The station's diplomatic officer, a tall Vexorian named Trell, approached the Maraxian delegation cautiously. "Your Majesty, we can postpone until a replacement translator is brought." Queen Zalara cut him off with a series of sharp clicks and hisses. Though Ethan couldn't understand the words, her meaning was clear. There was no time. "The matter is urgent," one of the Queen's attendants translated through his still-functioning device. "The Krell swarm has changed course. They will reach Maraxian space in less than 30 planetary rotations. Without immediate assistance, our civilization faces extinction." A murmur ran through the assembly. The Krell, a hive-mind species of insectoid creatures, were the stuff of nightmares. They consumed everything in their path, stripping planets bare before moving on. No single empire had the military might to stop them. It would take a unified response. "We need to coordinate now," the attendant continued. But without Her Majesty's translator. The Queen made another series of sounds, this time accompanied by a release of pheromones so strong that several delegates near her recoiled. Her scales had shifted to an almost black purple. Ethan recognized panic when he saw it. The Queen was terrified, not just for herself, but for her entire species. And suddenly, he remembered something from his linguistics courses at university, before he dropped out due to lack of funds. He'd specialized in nonverbal communication systems, with a particular interest in the chemical and tonal languages of the Outer Rim species. The Meraxians had been his favorite case study. Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan stepped forward, abandoning his cleaning cart. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden lull. "I might be able to help." All eyes turned to him. Ambassador Chen looked shocked to see a maintenance worker interrupting a high-level diplomatic meeting. "Cole, what are you doing?" hissed Security Chief Dawson, moving to intercept him. "I studied Meraxian communication patterns at university," Ethan explained quickly. "I'm not fluent, but I understand their basic linguistic structure." Chief Dawson looked skeptical. "You're a janitor." "Yes, and before that, I was a linguistics major specializing in xenobiology until I ran out of money for tuition," Ethan replied evenly. "Please, the Queen is trying to warn us about something urgent. Let me try." Ambassador Chen stepped forward, studying Ethan with newfound interest. "You understand Meraxian?" "Some of it," Ethan admitted. "Enough to grasp the fundamentals. Their language isn't just verbal, it's chemical and gestural too. I can't speak it properly without the right vocal structures, but I can understand a good portion of it." Chen looked to the station's diplomatic officer, who shrugged helplessly. "The nearest replacement translator is 12 hours away, at minimum." "Let him try," Chen decided. "What's your name?" "Ethan Cole, sir." The ambassador nodded and addressed the assembly. "The human delegation offers the assistance of Ethan Cole, who has some knowledge of Meraxian communication." The Queen's attendants chittered among themselves, clearly skeptical. Queen Zalara, however, leaned forward, her compound eyes fixed intently on Ethan. She made a series of rapid clicks and hisses, accompanied by a subtle hand gesture. Ethan took a deep breath. He recognized the formal greeting pattern of the royal court, demanding his credentials. He bowed deeply in the Meraxian style, arms crossed at the wrists. "Your Majesty," he said in standard Galactic, "I am not a certified translator, but I have studied your people's communication methods extensively. If you would be willing to speak slowly and use simplified royal court dialect, I believe I can help facilitate this emergency meeting." The Queen's scales shifted slightly, lightening from deep purple to a curious lavender. She made a single, questioning sound. "Yes," Ethan answered, recognizing the query. "I understand that dialect best." The Queen seemed to consider this for a moment, then nodded once, a gesture she had adopted for interspecies communication. She began to speak, more slowly this time, with exaggerated hand movements to complement her verbal and chemical signals. Ethan listened intently, occasionally closing his eyes to better focus on the subtle patterns in her speech. When she finished, he turned to address the assembly. "The Krell swarm has deviated from its predicted course," he translated. "Their new trajectory will bring them directly through the heart of Meraxian space within 30 rotations. The Meraxian homeworld and 17 colony worlds lie in their path. The Queen estimates casualties in the billions without immediate intervention." The assembly erupted in concerned murmurs. The Krell were opportunistic. They rarely changed course without reason. Ambassador Chen addressed the Queen directly. "Why have they altered their course? Do you have any intelligence on this?" Ethan relayed the question, and the Queen responded with a complex series of sounds and gestures. The Meraxian Deep Space Monitoring Network detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of their territory 3 rotations ago, Ethan translated. Shortly afterward, the Krell changed course. The Queen believes they may have detected something that attracted them, possibly a new food source or technology. Or they were deliberately directed, rumbled the representative from the Keldum Protectorate, a massive warrior species known for their strategic thinking. The timing is suspicious. The Queen made another series of sounds, and Ethan nodded. "Her Majesty shares your concern," he said. "The Meraxians have enemies who might benefit from their destruction. However, regardless of why the Krell have changed course, the immediate need is to stop them before they reach populated systems." The Vexorian diplomat tilted his eye stalks. "What does the Queen propose?" Ethan relayed the question, and the Queen launched into a detailed explanation, her hands moving rapidly to illustrate key points. Ethan concentrated intensely, occasionally asking her to repeat certain phrases. The Maraxian fleet is substantial but cannot stand alone against the Krell, he translated. Her Majesty proposes a joint defense force, with ships contributed by all major powers. Additionally, she offers access to classified Maraxian research on Krell communication patterns that might allow us to divert the swarm. This research, said Ambassador Chun, leaning forward with interest. How advanced is it? Ethan relayed the question, and the Queen's response was immediate and emphatic. The Maraxians have been studying the Krell in secret for decades, Ethan translated. They've identified certain frequencies that seem to repel or attract the swarm. It's not perfected, but combined with a strong military presence, it might be enough to alter their course away from populated systems. The assembly broke into multiple conversations, each delegation conferring among themselves. The Queen watched them anxiously, her scales still a worried lavender. She made a quiet sound, directed specifically at Ethan. You speak well for a maintenance worker. Ethan translated for himself, a small smile touching his lips. Your understanding of our ways is unusual. I find your culture fascinating, Your Majesty, he replied directly, bowing his head slightly. I only regret that my knowledge is incomplete. The Queen made another sound, this one accompanied by a subtle shift in her scales toward a more relaxed blue. It is more than we expected from any human, Ethan translated, feeling a small swell of pride. Ambassador Chen cleared his throat, bringing the assembly back to order. We need to make decisions quickly. The Krell wait for no one. I propose we form a joint task force immediately, with representatives from each government, to coordinate our response. The Keldum representative stood, towering over the others. The Keldum Protectorate will contribute 40 warships to this effort. One by one, the other delegations made similar pledges. The Vexorians offered their advanced sensor technology. The Morith committed their fastest scout ships. Even the notoriously isolationist Zalari promised medical support. As the pledges continued, Ethan kept translating for the Queen, who responded with growing relief, her scales gradually returning to their natural blue. The meeting continued for hours, with detailed planning and coordination. Ethan's throat grew dry, and his legs ached from standing, but he didn't dare ask for a break. Too much depended on clear communication. Finally, as the assembly reached its conclusions, Ambassador Chun turned to Queen Zalara. We will stand with the Maraxian Empire against this threat. Together, we can turn the Krell away from populated space. Ethan translated, and the Queen's response was a series of formal clicks that even those without translation could recognize as gratitude. She then added something else, directed at the assembly as a whole. The Maraxian Empire has stood apart for too long. Ethan translated, choosing his words carefully to capture her meaning. Today marks a new chapter in our history. If we survive this threat, we will not return to isolation. My people will take their place as full members of the galactic community. The declaration was met with approval from the assembly. Such a commitment from the powerful but reclusive Maraxians was almost as significant as the Krell threat itself. As the meeting adjourned, with delegates rushing off to contact their governments and begin mobilization, Queen Zalara approached Ethan directly. Her attendants looked scandalized at the breach in protocol. Royalty did not personally address service personnel. She made a series of sounds, too complex for Ethan to fully grasp, but he understood the general meaning. You have done my people a great service today, he translated hesitantly. I would know more about you. Ambassador Chun, who had been speaking with the Keldum representative, noticed the exchange and hurried over. Is everything all right? The Queen made another series of sounds, which Ethan translated. Her Majesty wishes to know why someone with my linguistic skills is working as maintenance staff. Chun looked uncomfortable. Well, that's a complex question involving education funding and... The truth is simple, Ethan interrupted. I ran out of money for university. The station was hiring janitors, not linguists. The Queen listened as Ethan explained, then made a declaration that left her attendants chittering in shock. Her Majesty says that once this crisis is resolved, she would like to offer me a position in the Maraxian Diplomatic Corps. Ethan translated, his voice betraying his surprise. As a cultural attaché and translator, Ambassador Chin's eyebrows shot up. That's unprecedented. The Maraxians have never employed non-Maraxians in government positions. The Queen made another sound, which Ethan understood perfectly. She says exceptions must be made for exceptional circumstances, he translated, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. The moment was interrupted by an urgent message over the station's communication system. All diplomatic personnel, please report to your designated coordination centers. Military mobilization protocols are now in effect. The Krell response had begun. Over the next 24 hours, the Galactic Nexus Station transformed from a diplomatic hub to a war room. Ethan found himself permanently reassigned from maintenance duty to the Maraxian delegation, serving as the Queen's primary translator while replacement devices were being rushed from the Maraxian homeworld. The station's central operations center was a flurry of activity as reports flooded in from across the quadrant. Ships were being recalled from routine patrols, weapons systems activated, defensive perimeters established. The combined fleet, now dubbed the Galactic Defense Force, was assembling at the edge of Maraxian space. Ethan hardly had time to process the dramatic change in his circumstances. One moment he had been emptying trash receptacles. The next, he was translating critical military intelligence for 17 species. The Krell swarm has maintained its course, reported the Vexorian tactical officer, its eye stalks swiveling to display the holographic map. At current speed, they will reach the Maraxian colony of Azurian in 26 rotations. Queen Zalara studied the projection, then made a series of sounds that Ethan quickly translated. The Queen says Azurian is home to over 200 million Maraxians. It's also the location of their most advanced research facilities, including much of their Krell research. Ambassador Chin frowned. Is it possible that's why the Krell changed course? Could they somehow know about this research? Ethan relayed the question, and the Queen's response was troubled. She says it's unlikely but not impossible. The Krell have shown a disturbing ability to target threats to their existence in the past. However, the research facility is deeply shielded against all known forms of detection. The Keldum commander, a battle-scarred veteran named Grex, pointed to another section of the map. Our fleet will intercept them here, 2 days before they reach Azurian. We will deploy the frequency emitters based on the Maraxian research and attempt to divert them from their course. And if that fails, asked the Morith representative, its gelatinous form rippling with concern. Then we fight, Grex stated simply. We have assembled the largest combined fleet in the history of the quadrant. If we cannot turn them, we will do everything possible to slow their advance while Azurian is evacuated. Queen Zalara spoke again, and Ethan translated. The Queen thanks you for your commitment, but wishes to emphasize that Azurian cannot be fully evacuated in the time available. Their priority will be the research teams and their data, which may be our best hope for developing a long-term solution to the Krell threat. The gravity of the situation settled heavily on the room. They were facing the potential loss of millions of lives. As the meeting continued, Ethan found himself becoming more than just a passive translator. The Queen began asking for his input on certain matters, particularly regarding how other species might interpret her statements. His years of studying cross-species communication were suddenly proving invaluable. During a brief recess, Ambassador Chin approached Ethan as he was getting a much-needed drink of water. You're doing remarkable work, Cole, the ambassador said. I've already put in a formal commendation for your personnel file. Thank you, sir, Ethan replied. But I'm just doing what anyone would in this situation. Chin shook his head. No, you're not. Do you know how rare it is to find someone who can bridge communication gaps like this? The Queen trusts you. I can see it in her behavior. That's worth more than any translator device. Before Ethan could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Everyone rushed back to the operations center, where the holographic display showed a disturbing new development. The Krell have increased their speed, the Vexorian tactical officer reported, its voice modulator conveying alarm. They will reach Azurian in 18 rotations, not 26 as previously calculated. Ethan translated the news for Queen Zalara, whose scales instantly darkened to deep purple. Her response was rapid and urgent. The Queen asks if the defense fleet can adjust its intercept point. Ethan translated. Grex studied the tactical display, his massive arms crossed over his armored chest. We can, but it will mean engaging them closer to Azurian, with less room for maneuver if our initial efforts fail. The Queen made another series of sounds, which Ethan translated with growing concern. Her Majesty says we have no choice. We must accelerate the evacuation of key personnel from Azurian immediately. She also suggests. Ethan paused, wanting to be certain he understood correctly. She suggests that we consider deploying the experimental Krell disruptor. This announcement caused immediate reactions around the room. The Morith representative's containment suit bubbled vigorously, a sign of agitation. The disruptor? I thought that technology was purely theoretical. Ethan relayed the question, and the Queen's answer was hesitant. The Miraxians have developed a prototype based on their research, he translated. It's designed to disrupt the hive mind communication of the Krell, potentially causing confusion within the swarm. However, it has never been tested on an actual Krell swarm, only on simulations. The effects could be unpredictable. Unpredictable how? Ambassador Chen asked sharply. The Queen's explanation was technical and complex. Ethan concentrated hard to ensure he translated accurately. The disruptor targets the neural frequencies used by the Krell to maintain swarm cohesion, he explained. In simulations, this caused the swarm to scatter and become disoriented. However, there's a risk it could have the opposite effect, driving them into a frenzy or causing them to attack more aggressively. There's also a small possibility it could push them to evolve a countermeasure, making them even more dangerous in the long term. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. It sounds like a last resort, Grex finally said. Something to deploy only if conventional methods fail. The Queen agreed with a series of clicks that needed no translation. As the meeting adjourned, with new orders being dispatched to the fleet and emergency evacuation protocols initiated for Azurian, Ethan found himself walking alongside Queen Zalara and her attendants. The Queen seemed deep in thought, her scales shifting subtly between shades of blue and purple. She suddenly turned to Ethan and made a series of sounds. You've done well today, he translated for himself. But I sense you have questions. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Your Majesty, the disruptor technology, why keep it secret until now? The Queen's response was measured, and Ethan listened carefully. The Miraxian Empire has always prioritized self-reliance, he translated. We developed the disruptor as a safeguard for our own worlds, never intending to share it. But isolation has its costs. Had we collaborated earlier, perhaps the technology would be more refined, less dangerous to deploy. It's not too late, Ethan suggested. With the combined scientific expertise of 17 species, we might be able to improve the disruptor before it's needed. The Queen considered this, then made a decisive sound. She agrees, Ethan told the others. Her Majesty is authorizing full disclosure of the disruptor research to the allied scientists. She requests that all species with relevant expertise send representatives to Azurian immediately to assist in refining the technology. As they continued walking, the Queen made another, quieter series of sounds, directed solely at Ethan. I have existed for 300 of your years, he translated, surprised by the personal nature of her comment. In that time, I have rarely been forced to reconsider my fundamental beliefs. Yet in the span of a single day, a human maintenance worker has made me question centuries of Miraxian isolation. Ethan wasn't sure how to respond to such a statement from a monarch. Necessity often brings unlikely allies together, Your Majesty. The Queen's scales shifted to a contemplative blue-green as she made another sound. Perhaps, Ethan translated, it is not necessity alone, but the recognition of a truth long ignored. No species exists in isolation. not even the Krell. With that profound observation, they entered the Queen's temporary quarters, where a secure communication link to the Meraxian homeworld had been established. There was much work to be done if they were to have any hope of saving Azurian and stopping the Krell swarm. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Ethan found himself working alongside the most brilliant scientific minds in the quadrant, all focused on refining the Meraxian disruptor technology. His role had evolved beyond mere translation. He now served as a cultural bridge, helping species with vastly different thought processes collaborate effectively. Ambassador Chun had arranged for Ethan's university records to be transferred to the station, confirming his academic background in xenolinguistics and nonverbal communication. The revelation that he had been only 2 semesters shy of completing his doctorate had raised more than a few eyebrows among the diplomatic corps. "You should have said something," Chun told him during a rare quiet moment. "The Federation has scholarship programs for promising specialists. We're always short on xenolinguists." Ethan shrugged. "By the time I dropped out, I was too proud to ask for help. Besides, the maintenance job let me observe species interactions firsthand. You'd be amazed what you can learn when people think you're invisible." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent summons to the operations center. The combined fleet had made contact with the leading edge of the Krell swarm. The holographic display showed hundreds of Krell bioships, massive, insectoid vessels that were as much living organism as they were spacecraft. They moved with unsettling coordination, like a school of predatory fish. Queen Zalara was already there, her scales a tense blue-violet as she watched the incoming data. She greeted Ethan with a formal gesture that he recognized as an expression of respect between equals, a far cry from how she had regarded him just days ago. Initial reports from the fleet announced the Vexorian tactical officer. "The Krell have not yet responded to our presence. They're maintaining course toward Azurian." The Queen made a series of rapid sounds, which Ethan translated. "Her Majesty asks if the fleet is in position to deploy the frequency emitters based on the Meraxian research." Grex, who was coordinating the military response from the station, nodded his massive head. "The emitters are ready. We're preparing to activate them now." Everyone watched tensely as the fleet began broadcasting the specific frequencies that the Meraxian research suggested might divert the Krell. For several agonizing minutes, there was no visible change in the swarm's behavior. Then, gradually, the leading edge of the swarm began to slow. "It's working," breathed Ambassador Chun. "They're responding to the frequencies." The relief in the room was palpable but short-lived. Just as it seemed the swarm might alter its course, something changed. The Krell bioships at the front of the formation suddenly accelerated, surging toward the fleet. "They're attacking," Grex bellowed. "All ships, defensive positions." The holographic display erupted with activity as the Allied fleet scrambled to respond. The Krell moved with frightening speed and precision, targeting the ships carrying the frequency emitters. Queen Zalara made a series of urgent sounds, which Ethan quickly translated. "The Queen says this confirms her suspicion that the Krell can identify threats to their collective. They're specifically targeting the emitters." "How could they know?" demanded the Morith representative. "The technology is new." The Queen's response was grim. "She says the Krell appear to have evolved since the Meraxians last encountered them." Ethan translated. "They're demonstrating adaptive behaviors not seen before. Either they've naturally evolved, or," he hesitated, making sure he understood correctly, "or someone has been tampering with them." This suggestion sent a ripple of alarm through the operations center. "Tampering?" Ambassador Chun repeated. "Who would be capable of such a thing? And more importantly, who would be insane enough to try?" Before the Queen could respond, the tactical display updated with new information. The Krell had broken through the fleet's forward line and destroyed 3 of the emitter ships. The remaining vessels were falling back, regrouping for a more defensive stance. "We need to deploy the disruptor," Grex stated flatly. "We have no choice now." All eyes turned to Queen Zalara, who stood motionless, her compound eyes fixed on the tactical display. Ethan could see the subtle shifts in her scales, revealing her internal conflict. Finally, she made a decisive series of sounds. The Queen authorizes deployment of the disruptor prototype, Ethan translated. However, she warns that based on the Krell's unexpected behavior, the results may be even less predictable than originally thought. Understood, Grex acknowledged grimly. But we're running out of options. Azurian's evacuation is only 30% complete. Orders were transmitted to the fleet, directing them to deploy the disruptor device, a collaborative creation born from Meraxian research and refined by the combined scientific expertise of the allied species. It had been rushed into production and deployed to the fleet just hours earlier, with minimal testing. As they waited for confirmation of the deployment, Ethan noticed the Queen making a series of small, repetitive gestures with her fingers. It wasn't part of any formal communication pattern he recognized. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "are you all right?" The Queen seemed startled by his question, as if she hadn't realized what she was doing. She responded with a soft series of clicks. A Meraxian prayer, Ethan translated for himself. A request for guidance from the ancestors. He nodded respectfully. "I understand. This is an impossible decision." The Queen studied him for a moment, then made another series of sounds, too complex for Ethan to fully grasp, but he understood enough to recognize gratitude and something deeper, a kind of trust that transcended their different species. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a shout from the tactical officer. "Disruptor deployed." All attention returned to the holographic display. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Krell continued their advance, pushing back the Allied fleet. Then, suddenly, the swarm behavior changed. The tight formation of Krell bioships began to break apart. Some vessels slowed to a stop, others began moving in erratic, circular patterns. A significant portion of the swarm peeled away from the main body, heading off in a completely different direction. "It's working," breathed Ambassador Chun. "The disruptor is breaking their hive-mind connection." Queen Zalara made an inquiring sound, which Ethan translated. "Her Majesty asks about the section of the swarm that separated. Where are they headed?" The tactical officer checked the readings. "They appear to be moving toward an uninhabited star system. No populated worlds in their path." A collective sigh of relief swept through the operations center. The disruptor had worked better than anyone had dared hope. But their celebration was premature. Without warning, the holographic display flickered, then stabilized to show a disturbing new development. The remaining Krell ships, still a formidable force, had regrouped with alarming speed. They were no longer moving toward Azurian. Instead, they had altered course directly toward the heart of the Allied fleet. "They're adapting," Grex growled. "Somehow, they're compensating for the disruptor's effect." Queen Zalara's scales darkened to an alarmed purple as she made a series of rapid sounds. "The Queen says this confirms her worst fears," Ethan translated urgently. "The Krell aren't just operating on instinct. They're demonstrating strategic adaptation. This goes beyond normal evolution." The next hour was chaos as the fleet engaged the Krell in direct combat. The Allies had superior firepower, but the Krell had numbers and a disturbing ability to sacrifice individual ships without hesitation if it gave them a tactical advantage. Ethan found himself working frantically, translating not just for the Queen, but for multiple species as they coordinated their response. His unique understanding of cross-species communication patterns helped bridge gaps that technology alone couldn't manage. As the battle raged, a priority message came through from one of the Meraxian science vessels near the edge of the combat zone. The Queen listened intently, then turned to Ethan, her scales shifting to a color he had never seen before, a deep, resonant gold that seemed to pulse with urgency. "The science vessel has detected an anomalous signal embedded within the Krell hive mind communications," Ethan translated, focusing intently on her complex explanation. "It's artificial, definitely not Krell in origin. Someone is broadcasting a control signal to the swarm. Can they trace it?" Ambassador Chen demanded. The Queen's response was quick and firm. "Yes," Ethan translated. "The signal is coming from within this star system, specifically from the third moon of the gas giant Vexen AR. The revelation sent shockwaves through the operations center. Vexen AR was at the edge of Meraxian space, a largely uninhabited system used primarily for mining operations. Who would have the technology to control the Krell? The Morith representative asked, its containment suit bubbling with agitation. And why direct them toward Meraxian space? Added the Vexorian diplomat. Queen Zalara made a series of sounds that Ethan recognized as a formal accusation, a communication pattern reserved for moments of extreme gravity in Meraxian culture. Her Majesty believes this may be the work of the Solarian Conclave, he translated carefully. They have long sought Meraxian technology and territory. Directing the Krell toward Azurian would force an evacuation, potentially allowing them to acquire research data in the chaos. The Solarians were a highly advanced but secretive species known for their technological prowess and moral flexibility. They had remained conspicuously absent from the emergency summit. If the Queen is right, Grex rumbled, then this isn't just an ecological disaster. It's an act of war. Ambassador Chen raised his hands. Let's not jump to conclusions. We need proof before making such accusations. The Queen made another series of sounds, which Ethan translated with a growing sense of urgency. Her Majesty proposes an immediate operation to neutralize the control signal. If we can disrupt it, the Krell may revert to their natural migration patterns, away from populated space. The fleet is fully engaged, Grex pointed out. We don't have ships to spare for such a mission. The Queen conferred briefly with her attendants, then made a decisive declaration. The Queen is offering her personal vessel, Ethan translated. It's equipped with advanced stealth technology and can reach Vexen AR undetected. She requests a small team of specialists to accompany her royal guard. This proposal was met with immediate objections. The idea of the Meraxian monarch personally undertaking such a dangerous mission was unprecedented. Your Majesty, with all due respect, the risk is too great, Ambassador Chen argued. You are too valuable to your people. The Queen's response was firm and unyielding. She says that if the Krell destroy Azurian and continue through Meraxian space, there won't be much of an empire left to rule, Ethan translated. She also points out that her vessel is uniquely qualified for this mission. No other ship in the quadrant combines its speed, stealth capabilities, and defensive systems. After much debate, a compromise was reached. The Queen would remain on the station while her vessel, under the command of her most trusted guards, would undertake the mission to Vexen AR. A small team of specialists would accompany them, a Vexorian communications expert, a Keldum tactical officer, a Morith scientist specializing in signal analysis, and, at the Queen's insistence, Ethan Cole. Me? Ethan was stunned by the request. Your Majesty, I'm not a field operative. I'm just a linguist, and not even a fully qualified one at that. The Queen made a series of sounds that needed no translation. Her meaning was clear in her posture and the authoritative blue of her scales. She would not be denied. Her Majesty says your understanding of Meraxian communication will be essential, Ethan translated for the others. The Royal Guards are warriors, not diplomats. You'll serve as her voice on this mission. And so, less than an hour later, Ethan found himself aboard the Queen's personal vessel, a sleek, iridescent craft that seemed to shift colors like the Queen's own scales. The interior was designed for Meraxian physiology, with higher gravity and a denser atmosphere than he was accustomed to, but environmental systems had been adjusted to accommodate the diverse team. As they prepared for departure, Ambassador Chen pulled Ethan aside. You realize what the Queen is doing, don't you? By sending you as her representative, she's elevating your status in a way that can't be ignored later. No human has ever held such a position of trust with the Meraxians. Ethan hadn't considered the political implications. I'm just doing what needs to be done, sir. Chen smiled wryly. That attitude is precisely why she trusts you. Most people in the diplomatic corps spend their careers calculating angles. You just step up when you're needed. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Good luck out there. The fate of several worlds may rest on this mission. The journey to Vexen AR took just under 7 hours, during which time the team prepared for their operation. The plan was relatively straightforward. Locate the source of the control signal, neutralize it, and gather evidence of who was responsible. The execution, however, promised to be anything but simple. The third moon of Vexen R was a barren, cratered rock with a thin, toxic atmosphere. Sensors detected a small installation on the far side, a structure that didn't appear on any official charts. Definitely not a mining operation, noted the Vexorian communications expert as they observed the installation from orbit. Those are quantum array transmitters, extremely powerful and highly directional, perfect for long-range control signals. Any life signs? Asked Carex, the Keldum tactical officer. Minimal, replied the Morith scientist. Environmental systems are running, but I'm only detecting 3 or 4 biological signatures. Automated facility, most likely. Ethan studied the installation through the ship's visual sensors. Something about the architecture seemed familiar, but it wasn't Solarian as the Queen had suspected. The design principles, the materials used, they reminded him of something else entirely. We need to move quickly, Carex urged. The fleet won't be able to hold the Krell indefinitely. They landed a short distance from the installation, using a ridge of lunar rock for cover. The team donned environmental suits. Ethan's had been hastily modified from Meraxian designs, and made their way toward the facility on foot. As they approached, Ethan noticed something odd about the security measures. The outer defenses are extensive, but they're all focused outward, designed to repel an approach from space or the main settlement areas. There's minimal coverage on this side. They weren't expecting anyone to approach from this direction, Carex agreed. Overconfidence. Good for us. They located an access point, a maintenance airlock that showed signs of regular use. The Vexorian communications expert made quick work of the security system, and they were inside. The interior of the facility was utilitarian and eerily quiet. They moved cautiously through corridors lined with equipment that hummed with power, following the increasing strength of the transmission signal. When they finally reached the central control room, what they found left them momentarily speechless. The massive quantum transmitter was unmistakable, its energy signature pulsing in perfect synchronization with the Krell swarm's movements. But it wasn't Solarians operating the equipment. The 3 beings monitoring the transmitter were Zalari, a species known for their medical expertise and their declared neutrality in most galactic conflicts. They had even pledged medical support at the emergency summit. Before the team could react, the Zalari noticed their presence. Rather than showing surprise or attempting to flee, the lead operator simply turned calmly to face them. Right on schedule, the Zalari said in flawless standard galactic. We expected someone would trace the signal eventually. Though I admit, we didn't anticipate it would happen quite so quickly. Carex raised his weapon. Shut down the transmitter. Now, the Zalari made no move to comply. I'm afraid I can't do that. The experiment must continue to its conclusion. Experiment. Ethan stepped forward. You're directing the Krell toward populated worlds as an experiment. A necessary one, the Zalari replied with clinical detachment. The Krell represent the most efficient adaptive biological system in the known galaxy. Understanding how they respond to external control could revolutionize multiple fields of science. At the cost of billions of lives, Ethan said incredulously. The Zalari tilted its head. A regrettable but unavoidable consequence. Scientific progress often requires sacrifice. Ethan had heard enough. While Carex kept the Zalari covered, he moved to the transmitter controls. His university studies had included basic xenotechnology. He recognized the fundamental operating principles, even if the specific implementation was unfamiliar. Don't touch that, the Zalari warned. The system is delicately calibrated. Disrupting it incorrectly could drive the Krell into a frenzy, potentially causing them to attack indiscriminately. Ethan hesitated, his hands hovering over the controls. How do I safely shut it down? You don't, the Zalari stated flatly. The protocol is irreversible once initiated. The Krell will continue on their programmed course regardless of what you do here. The Morath scientist moved to examine the equipment more closely. He's lying. There's always a way to terminate a control sequence. The question is whether we can find it in time. As the team debated their next move, Ethan noticed something about the transmitter's code display, a pattern in the signal that reminded him of Maraxian musical notation, which he had studied as part of his linguistic research. The Krell communicated through complex harmonic frequencies. This control signal was mimicking those patterns, but with subtle distortions that would redirect and manipulate the swarm. If he could reverse those distortions, I need direct access to the transmission code, Ethan said suddenly. I think I can modify it to send the Krell away from populated space. The Vexorian communications expert looked skeptical. You're a linguist, not a programmer. The Krell don't use programming as we understand it, Ethan explained. They communicate through patterns that are closer to language than code. I recognize the structure of this signal. It's based on harmonic linguistic principles similar to Maraxian ceremonial communication. While the others secured the Zalari operators, Ethan worked feverishly at the transmitter controls. He wasn't trying to shut down the signal. That might indeed cause the Krell to react unpredictably. Instead, he was subtly altering its content, changing the message being sent to the swarm. What exactly are you telling them? The Morath scientist asked, watching Ethan's work with fascination. I'm using what I know about Maraxian territorial warnings, Ethan explained, his fingers flying over the controls. Their language has specific patterns for marking dangerous areas that should be avoided. I'm essentially telling the Krell that Maraxian space, and all allied territories, are hazardous and should be circumvented. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but appreciate the irony. His failed academic career, which had led to him becoming a janitor, had now placed him in the perfect position to understand both the problem and its solution. No pure military strategist or programmer would have recognized the linguistic patterns embedded in the control signal. After 20 tense minutes, Ethan had reconfigured the transmission. It's done. Now we wait to see if they respond. They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, the team received a priority communication from the Galactic Nexus station. The holographic image of Ambassador Chen appeared, his expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. Whatever you did, it's working, he reported. The Krell have broken off their attack. They're changing course away from Maraxian space. Our analysts are projecting their new trajectory will take them through an uninhabited sector. The relief in the control room was palpable. We've secured the facility and 3 Zalari operators, Carex reported. They claim this was an unauthorized scientific experiment. Chen's expression hardened. The Zalari government is already denying any knowledge of this operation. They're calling it the work of rogue elements. Convenient, the Vexorian communications expert remarked dryly. Regardless of who authorized it, we've gathered enough evidence to present to the Galactic Council, Chen said. The Zalari will face serious consequences for this. He looked directly at Ethan. The Queen has requested your immediate return to the station, Cole. She was quite insistent. As they prepared to leave, securing the facility and the Zalari prisoners for a follow-up team to collect, Ethan found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led him here. 3 days ago, he had been emptying waste receptacles. Now he had helped save billions of lives and potentially altered the course of galactic politics. Upon their return to the Galactic Nexus station, they were greeted as heroes. The combined fleet had successfully contained the remaining Krell ships, which were now peacefully following the new course Ethan had programmed. Queen Zalara was waiting in the docking bay, a breach of protocol that left her attendants practically vibrating with distress. As Ethan descended the ramp, the Queen approached him directly. Without hesitation, she performed a formal gesture that caused gasps from those familiar with Maraxian culture, a recognition of life debt, the highest honor her species could bestow. She then spoke, slowly and deliberately, in a way that ensured Ethan would understand every nuance. The Maraxian Empire owes its continued existence to your knowledge and courage, he translated for himself and the others present. What began with a simple act of stepping forward when needed has culminated in the salvation of my people. This debt cannot be repaid, but it will be honored for generations to come. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, a formal document in his hand. The Allied Council has reached a unanimous decision. Ethan Cole, in recognition of your extraordinary service, you are being offered the position of Chief Xenolinguistics Officer for the Galactic Nexus Station, with a full scholarship to complete your doctoral studies. Ethan was speechless. It was everything he had once dreamed of before financial reality had forced him to abandon his education. The Queen made another series of sounds, which Ethan translated with growing amazement. Additionally, Her Majesty requests that you accept a permanent position as cultural liaison between humanity and the Maraxian Empire, the first such position ever offered to a non-Maraxian. I don't know what to say, Ethan stammered. Say yes, Chin suggested with a smile. Unless you prefer janitorial duties? Ethan laughed. No, I think I've emptied my last waste receptacle. He bowed deeply to the Queen in the formal Maraxian style. I would be honored to accept both positions, Your Majesty. The Queen's scales shifted to a pleased azure as she made a final declaration. Her Majesty says that sometimes the most extraordinary individuals are found in the most ordinary places. Ethan translated. The Maraxian Empire has always prided itself on strength and technological advancement, but today we were saved by something we had never properly valued: the power of understanding across the boundaries of species. In the days that followed, as the diplomatic repercussions of the Zalari experiment unfolded and the Allied fleet escorted the Krells safely through uninhabited space, Ethan found himself at the center of a profound shift in interspecies relations. The Maraxians, long isolated and aloof, were opening diplomatic channels that had been closed for centuries. 6 months later, Ethan stood in the newly constructed Maraxian embassy on Earth, another unprecedented development. As he watched Queen Zalara address the United Earth Congress, with his careful translation enabling perfect understanding between the species, he reflected on how completely his life had changed. From maintaining the physical structure of the Galactic Nexus Station, he had somehow become someone who helped maintain the connections between vastly different civilizations. It was a role he had been preparing for his entire life, even during those years pushing a cleaning cart through diplomatic corridors. As the Queen concluded her historic address, formally establishing permanent relations between humans and Maraxians, she added a personal note that Ethan translated with pride. Let it be remembered that when communication failed and panic threatened to divide us, it was not technology that saved us, but a human who understood the value of listening before speaking, of learning before judging. These are the qualities upon which lasting peace must be built. The applause was thunderous, and for once, Ethan didn't mind being visible to everyone in the room. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.